Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. As you may know in physics, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and this absolutely applies to politics as well. Right now, what I am seeing going on is Mark Carney and his liberal government being way overconfident about the one floor crossing that they got, and then the resignation of conservative MP Matt Genero. He's not actually resigning yet, but in the spring he will be leaving his seat. I think it's because the conservatives think that there may just be a federal election at that time anyways, so why not have him just serve another 4 or 5 months before leaving? But the liberals are gleeful about this. This is the biggest political coup they've ever had in the past several years. And now they are getting really, really cocky, thinking that they're untouchable. Of course, we're going to have more conservatives come and join us. Maybe there are conservatives who will actually cross the floor and join the liberals still. I feel like if there was a time to go, it would have been with Chris. I was it D'Entremont. There you go. I always have to orient myself to say that again. But if there was a time to leave, it was with Chris D'Entremont, or it was at the same time Matt Genero was announcing that he was going to resign. I don't really see this as being a slow trickle unless some shoe drops with Pierre Polyev and a few people get sick of him and then leave, but I don't see that happening. But the liberals are just gleeful, and I don't think they realize that the economy and the budget are going to come back to bite them. They're just acting like nothing could be better than right now. We had some random backbench red Tory join us. The deputy whip of the Conservative Party joined us, ergo we cannot be stopped, even though if you look at the polling, they used to have a lead of around 10 points over the conservatives, and they've been diminished down to even the best pollsters, giving them a 3% lead, and in other pollsters, the conservatives have a 1 to 2% lead. But anyways, before I get into it, I just want to remind you guys that, hey, if you like the show, make sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you are not yet a subscriber, and of course, leave a comment on what you think about all this. But I want to start us off with this clip of Conservative MP Billy Morin asking the Liberals a question about their budget and them acting like, oh, who cares about this? Harper had deficits too. None of this matters. I'm telling you, they are acting like this because of the one floor crossing. They think nothing else matters anymore.
Liberals have introduced the most costly and largest budget deficit in history outside of COVID. The cost of this Liberal budget will drive up the cost of food, housing, and everything else Canadians buy. The young families, seniors, and veterans in Edmonton Northwest are having to make hard choices as the snow falls. It's costing more to heat their homes and feed their families. But every day in this House, the Liberals say families are just imagining higher living expenses by their taxes and increased spending. So why is the Prime Minister breaking his promise to spend less and pouring more inflationary fuel on the fire?
Reasonable question. And now let's get to a very unreasonable answer.
The Honourable Secretary of State for Defence Procurement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Budget 2025 will enable Canada to step up to meet the moment, to include $82 billion for defence and security. And here's a fun fact, Mr. Speaker. Stephen Harper's 2009 budget, adjusted for inflation, is actually the biggest deficit budget in Canadian history, with little to show for it. We'll take no lessons from the Conservatives.
Look at that face here as he sits down, thinking he's really scored a big one right here. No, they do not have a great gotcha on this. You know, Harper's budget, adjusted for inflation, had a bigger deficit than ours today. No. Well, yes, in raw terms, but if you actually take a more fulsome look at the current budget, considering what our actual debt servicing costs were back in 2009, I believe it would probably be below potentially $20 billion a year, if not lower. 5 years ago, our debt servicing costs were like $38 billion a year, $39 billion, which was really bad. That was the consequences of many years of Justin Trudeau being in charge. But then he had another 5 years after that. And as of today, our debt servicing cost is bigger than the health transfer budget. So we pay $55 billion in just debt servicing costs alone. And then we poured on a $78 billion deficit this year. Next year, it's like 62 billion, then it's going to be 58 billion, and then it's going to be 55 billion. It's not stopping, and you are going to pay even more debt servicing costs every single year. The difference with Harper is he had balanced budgets. He then severely reduced the budget after 2009. That also was in the wake of the housing market crash in the United States that ended up putting the world into a recession. And by the way, is he criticizing Mark Carney, who was the then governor of the Bank of Canada? He was part of that Harper team, and it all tended to work out pretty well, mostly because he was listening to Harper and Flaherty tell him what to do as the governor of the Bank of Canada. Keep the monetary policy pretty stable. Let's not blow out the inflation. The Liberals are blowing out the inflation, blowing out the deficit. They are increasing our debt servicing costs every year, and our actual spending has not been curbed as much as they like to pretend it is. They act as if it's a more conservative budget because they reduce some spending over here, even if it skyrocketed over here way more than it was reduced on the service side. So we're reducing some overstaffing in some areas, but for every dollar that we're saving in overstaffing, we spend another $3 or $4 somewhere else on an infrastructure project that's probably not going to be done on time, probably going to be over budget, and probably not going to be as nearly as useful as the Liberals are marketing it, like their clean energy grid system. Anyways, but let's move on from that, and let's go talk about Mark Carney being interviewed yesterday, making a snide remark about how, things are looking pretty good with the Liberal bench, and we only need a couple more Conservatives to come over.
One more number before I wrap up. How many seats do you need to have a majority?
I can't remember.
Do you want to answer?
Need a couple.
Just a couple.
Just
All right.
a couple. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister.
So call your local
Carney.
MP
Yes.
if they're not a Liberal and tell them to come in. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Very good.
You would think the man had just actually won a majority government. These guys are seriously over cocky right now. And I want to jump over to a couple of clips from some news shows, one CBC Power and Politics, and then I also want to talk about our favorite YouTuber, Laura Babcock's The O Show. I want to show you these two shows back to back to demonstrate how the media and leftist cheerleaders like Laura Babcock are trying to turn this all into a big, condemnation of Pierre Poilievre as a leader because they lost Chris d'Entremont. Apparently, this is now an indictment of Pierre Poilievre, a guy who seemingly was just complaining about the fact that he didn't get to be the deputy speaker, but they did let him be deputy whip. That was enough to make him leave, and that's apparently a big failure on Pierre Poilievre's part. And then we also have them trying to talk about Matt Généreux and how Matt, on his way out, is not nearly being complimentary enough of Pierre Poilievre. And, it probably shows cracks are starting to show.
There on the news that Matt Généreux is resigning as a Conservative Member of Parliament. Généreux, who's an Edmonton MP, released his resignation letter just as MPs began voting on a Conservative motion to reject the Liberal budget. The Alberta Conservative says he ran in the last election hopeful, but the outcome was not what he anticipated. And this all comes, of course, after another Conservative, Chris d'Entremont, left the party and joined the Liberal caucus the same day the government's budget was tabled. Lots to dig into with our reporter roundtable. Robert Fife is the Ottawa bureau chief.
I'm not trying to nitpick here, but I don't feel like if we were talking about Liberal internal dissension, that David Cochrane would be like, ha, 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 isn't this so bad now to you, Mr. Robert Fife? Or whatever, I think it might be the other one. There's always these two guys at the Globe Mail who always co-write articles together. But they come on, they wouldn't have been talking like this if it was internal dissension in the Liberal ranks.
For the Globe and Mail, Mia Rabson is the Deputy Parliamentary Bureau Chief at the Canadian Press, and Joël Denis Bellavance is the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for La Presse. And all three of you are doing big rewrites of whatever you are going to file today to deal with this. Bob Fife, the budget is now the number 3 headline of the week. I mean, what do we make of this resignation on the heels of the defection?
Well, it's very interesting. In his letter, Mr. Généreux praises Pierre Poilievre before the election, but after the election, there are that statement of his makes no mention of praise for Pierre Poilievre. He also says that he needs to spend time with his family. There's a backstory that we all know in this city, that there has been a lot of pressure that was put on by the Conservative Party on Mr. Jean, pressure that quite a number of Conservative MPs are very upset about, because that's not the way to treat another colleague.
Sorry, but like, if the pressure was to prevent him, if this is true, from going to the Liberal caucus, I'm sorry, are we hurting someone's feelings by saying, hey, please don't, screw over your own constituents by just completely flipping what party you represent, and in fact representing the party that was the opposite of what the majority of your constituents wanted? Because let's be very clear, when you vote Conservative, in a lot of ways, it's because you definitely do not want a Liberal in. Now, they're saying like, oh, well, they're saying it's about how he wants to go spend time with his family. And a lot of people have been like, that's a likely story. His wife and his children, or I think he just might have one child, they moved to Victoria, and she's now working as a doctor or some sort of medical practitioner there. And so there actually is a good reason for him to be leaving office. This was his last ride. If he didn't get into government, maybe he wasn't really interested in running again. And, well, the guy has to live in Ottawa and part-time in Edmonton, and then trying part-time and even harder to go to Victoria to hang with family. I think that's a fine explanation. Maybe that's not it. Maybe he wanted to go over the Liberal benches. But what was that stupid point Robert Fife made? Stephen Chase is the other one of the two guys. But Robert Fife said, like, oh, he praised Pierre Poilievre before the election in his letter, but he didn't praise Pierre Poilievre after. I'm like, well, considering that the only thing we know from Matt Genero about his opinion of Pierre Poilievre is positive in the letter, I'm not sure if we can then say, he didn't then say that he loves him as of November 6th, 5 p.m. Ergo, there's a lot of speculation we can create here of Pierre Poilievre is on the ropes, and that we should all be saying tons of nice things about Mark Carney, because if Poilievre is down, then Mark Carney is up, because that's what they're attempting to do. They're putting down Poilievre, so relatively, Mark Carney seems better. But I will get back to Robert Fife making his point. We will listen to the next guest a little bit, and then I do want to get over to Laura Babcock.
And that means who's next. And as one very senior Conservative said to me, and I'll read it right now, when Pierre Poilievre loses MPs like Genero, there's big trouble brewing.
Right.
And there is going to be fallout from what happened to Mr. Genero.
When you talk about pressure,
I'm sorry, is Matt Genero of Genero? I know people who know him. Is he such a prize that this is like the death knell of the party? Frankly, did you know who Matt Genero was before all this? I'm not saying not a good guy. I'm not trying to imply anything like that. What I am merely saying here is that the way the media is acting feels extremely cynical. That anything negative that happens is the nail in the coffin. Is this all good? No, I would never say it's good. But at the same time, it's not really like the big collapse of Poilievre's leadership that people are making it out to be. It seems like a self-interested person left the party, and a guy who's probably on his way out anyways decided to just speed that up and leave early. But the idea of like, oh, well, he's losing his strongest pillar, Matt Genero. Maybe he was like the guy holding everything together. I don't know. And the whole idea that like, oh, someone's going to leave because of the treatment of Matt Genero is like, what if he was planning on going to the Liberals and someone badgered him into stopping? You're upset that they badgered him to not do the wrong thing. Like, I don't get the problem here.
Sure. Pressure to not cross the floor.
Pressure to not cross the floor.
To join the Liberals.
So his choice was, if I'm not going to cross the floor because of unhappiness with the style of leadership of Pierre Poilievre, I can't stay in this caucus any longer because of the way I've been treated, so I'm going to resign.
It's quite a moment, Mia. In 2025 continues to surprise me, and I kind of felt that was impossible at this point. I mean, what are your thoughts on this and where it leaves things for the Conservatives?
The year is still young. There's many more things that will probably surprise us the way this year's gone. I mean, the timing of this is incredible, right? I mean, we have a budget speech from the opposition leader yesterday, the day after he lost one MP. And then today, it seemed like maybe the dust had settled a little bit, like there wasn't seeming to be, people sort of were pulling back from the notion that there was going to be another flood of floor crossers. And now we see this sudden resignation from, a moderate MP from Alberta, a well-liked MP, somebody who, he may not be a household name for many Canadians, but within the Conservative.
Yes, because he isn't a household name. And I will be addressing in a post later. I'm going to show you a post I made a couple days ago, just debunking this idea that people have been spreading it. Oh, it shows that Polyev can't win the next election because moderates don't like him. Look, he lost D'Entremont and now we have Genero leaving. It doesn't mean anything, guys. The idea as well that you have to talk moderate and you have to have moderate nothing policies in order to bring moderates in is stupid. And by the way, I always just dismiss the idea there's such a thing as a moderate voter. There are moderate MPs, which are just kind of do nothing, don't really want to take hard stances on anything MPs. But when it comes to actual voters, because they're not in office, they don't have the spotlight on them, they can have whatever opinion that they want and as strongly as they want. Most voters don't tend to care about most issues, but the issues they do care about, they really care about and they want strong action on them. But all of this feels like an op in order to try and convince Polyev to just become moderate and squishy and don't say anything too intense. Just sit there and let the liberals effectively win. Just let them do what they want.
He was respected as much as I know. It's a big blow to Mr. Polyev. I mean, he clearly was rattled yesterday in the House of Commons when he forgot to introduce the Conservative amendment to the budget. He's not focused, obviously, on what he should be focused on. This is distracting for them, and it's never going to be good news for the Conservatives. I agree with Bob. The fallout of this is going to continue.
JD, your initial reaction?
I just don't really see it. I don't see this being like the big story of the next 6 months. It's what the liberals, it's what the media would like to be the big story. And that's why, again, you see a very smiley Liberal Party right now. You see a very smiley, jokey Mark Carney because, look at all those other guys having this internal chaos. But is the budget good? But is the actual performance of the government good? This is the thing that is going to catch up to them. Average people, you can jangle keys in front of the public's face for a little bit. It's funny that there's internal chaos going on with the Conservatives, but do I actually like what is happening right now in our own government? And I think that if you actually called an election, the idea that the Liberals would win, it's not that they couldn't win. Obviously, they could, but people are acting like there would be a done deal if election happened right now. I don't think so. In fact, what you've seen in the polling is that the Conservatives have been the party to maintain their support levels, and the Liberals have been the ones struggling to hold on to the gains that they had made in the election. Some polls have them falling below their election performance. Some of them have them just coasting, which isn't great because you have a lot of political advantages from having one government. Again, a lot of people tend to put a lot of hope into you because you form the government and let's hope these guys are going to do a good job. And that hope seems to have died off pretty quickly as this just feels like another Liberal government. It feels like the Paul Martin 2004 government that can limp along a little bit longer, and they also got a floor crosser in Belinda Stronach. It didn't save them from the poor fundamentals they had going on. But here we have on Laura Babcock's show, of course, we have guy up on the top left with his Redditor glasses and his Black Lives Matter shirt, the random older gentleman on the bottom, and then we're going to get to Laura Babcock having a bit of a meltdown over just her pure hatred for Pierre Polyev.
When the weather storm is coming, we're going to scare you to death for 3 days at the maximum possible rate. And damn if the storm didn't skip the city yet again. Everyone knows there's not going to be an election, but that was all the coverage post-budget was all election. Oh my God, we could have an election before Christmas, a second in a year. No, we won't.
Never a chance of it. And you know what? I've started doing a new regular weekly segment on 610 with Jean Velitis, and but I think both weeks I'm like let's not even bother talking about it. Like it's not going to happen, right? I had conversations this week with people who can't stand the Liberal Party for its legacy and what it's done to the economy, but voted for Carney because even they as Conservatives couldn't stomach Polyev because they're smart people.
Does she not understand what she has just described? This is what I mean with overconfidence. She has just described people she knows hate the Liberal Party, and in 2025, in the April election, were willing to cast a ballot for the Liberals. Probably because of the Trump issue, probably because of the idea that, Carney is a more moderate man. Justin Trudeau was the problem. Carney isn't the problem. But do you think that person isn't going to revert to their more strongly held opinion over time that the Liberals are incompetent with the budget post this terrible budget? She's referencing people before the budget even came out saying that, yes, we do not like what the Liberals have done, but we just don't like Polyev. okay, you can have that opinion in the short run. As things get worse, you're really not going to be casting a ballot. At the very least, those people are probably not going to show back up for Mark Carney again. Whereas, what conservative constituency is abandoning Polyev? That's the thing. That is the option to get rid of the Liberals. They have, and I think he's actually gotten better since the election with stronger positions on immigration and the economy and whatnot. I think that what you're going to really do is that as people continue to get sicker with the Liberals, and as there's no more Trump issue because it's clear it's just liberal domestic policy that's screwing with us, you're going to have all these people who were these one-off liberal voters coming back to the conservatives, or at least they're going to stop voting liberal.
If the Conservative Party isn't reading the freaking tea leaves on this and understanding, it's not just that a majority of women can't stand Polyev, and the misogyny from his supporters that I am subjected to and other women is insane, right? It's not just that women can't stand.
Misogyny from their supporters. I mostly see women making fun of Laura Babcock because she is out of her mind. She does not know how to emotionally orient herself. It's called what I call, it's emotional incontinence. She goes really low and then she just blasts because she doesn't know how to regulate her own emotions. It's not misogyny. It's not sexism. It's people pointing and laughing at somebody who desperately doesn't understand politics and doesn't understand how to actually regulate themselves emotionally.
It's also that we can't stand his policies. When someone tried to say this week that, Polyev was going to help people, poor people on affordability with the affordability crisis, I put out a list of all the things he's voted against in 20 years.
Does she know what she is? This really proves she just genuinely doesn't know anything about politics. Oh, I've looked at what he voted for. What did he vote for? Against big government entitlement programs? Do you think that is how a country gets wealthy? Because apparently, if that's how it works, the Soviet Union was wealthier than the United States in the 1980s. And I can tell you, having not grown up in the 80s, that I don't need the personal experience to know that it's not true. There was never a time when government programs have ever made people wealthy. But that's how little Laura Babcock understands about politics. She just thinks like, well, Polyev voted against these social programs, ergo he's not in favor of affordability.
He's full of shit. And we know that. We have a 20-year record on this guy. He's peevish. He's pathetic. He's now lost control of his own caucus. The stuff he puts out there, outright lies about Canada having war zones, going after the RCMP. I mean, no wonder MPs are crossing the floor. So by my math, we're at 170, I think, for the Liberals. 2 away, aren't we, guys? Mark, from majority? Yeah, I think that, honestly, I think that Canadians aren't going to really be upset, other than the MAGA hardcore, that these guys are moving over, or women are going to move over, because you know what? We need to get stuff built. Whether you love the budget or you hated the budget is a build budget.
Is it? Like, yeah, there's more infrastructure money in it, but what's this idea that you can just keep throwing money into projects? And we're building, we're investing in the economy. Not at all. And these people are in a cult. They just rattle random crap off about Polyev. Oh, he's lies. Lies about what? Oh, he attacks the RCMP. No, he didn't. He attacked the RCMP executive because in many cases of liberal corruption, they just basically didn't investigate. They effectively just let the Liberals get away with it. Not that they burned documents. It's just they didn't really press the Liberals to get anything. They gave them as much time as they wanted to sort out their stories. They didn't compel testimony from staff members of the Prime Minister's office in the SNC Lavalin scandal and stuff like that. What is she on about? Oh, have you seen his voting record? He doesn't like affordability. He actually likes cutting taxes. So what are you talking about? He doesn't like affordability. But again, this woman just believes that whatever the Liberals believe is good and whatever the Conservatives believe is bad because she is in a cult. But now let's move on to one more thing. I just wanted to cover this one post that I wanted to react to. Again, it's a bit of an overconfidence liberal post, and I was reacting to it on social media the other day. We had this one guy, Nate Manis, who is some form of a liberal, either staff member or some sort of a guy just with the Liberal Party. And he said, and this is in the aftermath of Chris d'Entremont leaving, he says, moderate conservatives are being alienated by Polyev's divisive and destructive approach to politics. For the sake of Canadian democracy and society, as a partisan liberal, I hope the Conservatives abandon this approach. Until then, red Tories are welcome in the big liberal tent. Now, I said to this, because I find this talking point so obnoxious. So I responded in this, in kind this way. This is such an obvious lie. Yes, Pierre Poilievre has quote unquote alienated. Yeah, I'm being sarcastic here, of course. I say, yes, Poilievre has alienated moderate conservatives, which is why he got a higher percentage of the vote in 2025 than Scheer and O'Toole, the man who apparently is the most appealing to moderates. Me mentioning specifically O'Toole being supposedly super, a moderate whisperer. I go on to say, the Conservatives made some bad local and national campaign decisions and so just barely lost to Carney's Liberals, who had the perfect news cycle to run on, and the NDP vote collapsed in large part because of the weak and tired brand of then leader Jagmeet Singh. It is a myth that to win quote-unquote moderates, a semi-mythical concept in and of itself, you need to speak in mild tones about the mild change you plan on making in government. In reality, the vast majority of all voters are baskets of issues they want serious action on. Very few want to vote for a non-incumbent party that promises mild changes to what is currently in place. That is what voting for an incumbent is for, in the sense that if you generally like what's going on and you don't want many changes, you vote for the incumbent. That's why O'Toole fell on his face, saying, let's do this 10% more different than what Trudeau was doing, was not a very compelling message in 2021. I finish up there saying, this is basically a stupid rhetorical game to try and make conservatives lose their nerve. Since the April election, Poilievre has rightfully strengthened many of his positions, and in doing so has cemented his support base of 39 to 42%, while the Liberals have sunk below their April support levels in many polls since their honeymoon ended 2 months ago. Which, of course, I agree with myself here, and some of my other friends who are into sort of election analysis agreed. The Liberals had a massive overperformance. They are not going to be able to repeat that performance. Laura Babcock basically indicated that the Liberals are going to have a very tough time driving out their voters again to vote for them, because she just admitted in her anecdote that the Liberals were relying on people who don't even like the Liberals. They could just be convinced in a moment that Poilievre is too much like Donald Trump, so you have to vote for Mark Carney. Or at the very least, Mark Carney is going to be the toughest on Donald Trump. Do you think in spring, when all the problems are worse and Carney hasn't fulfilled any of his promises to get a trade deal signed and to fight for Canada, that you're going to have the same former conservative voters swapping over and continuing to vote Liberal? I really don't think so. Whereas if you want Poilievre in, it's not like you're fatigued out and you don't want to vote anymore. You want the Liberals out and you generally like Poilievre and his policies, you're very unlikely to be swaying towards another party. And I think especially the blue-collar, hard hat-wearing former NDP voters who put the Conservatives over the top in ridings like Windsor, they're not going to suddenly, scoot on back to the NDP if they make Heather McPherson the leader, if they make some pro-Hamas communist the leader. They're probably just going to stay away and keep voting Conservative because the Conservatives, on a fundamental social level, understand them. Same thing with the fishermen in Newfoundland and Labrador. Same thing with East Asian voters in places like Richmond and Richmond Hill and Markham, where they're very concerned about drugs and crime. I think that the thing that the Conservatives failed to do in this last election, and they can win the next one by just doing this, cut taxes 20% across the board. Now, I am a cultural conservative, and I want immigration slashed too, and Poilievre is already doing that. That's why I'm not highlighting that. But on top of everything Poilievre's already doing, if he wants to win, and not just win, but get more than 190 seats, 20% across the board tax cut. Every single tax bracket, corporate taxes, maybe even take 1% off of the GST. Just a slashing across the board. I don't even care if Poilievre runs a deficit for a year or two, as long as people are being given their own money back and we can kickstart the economy again by getting the government off of its neck. But anyways, that should be it for this video, guys. The big takeaway is that as cheery as the Liberals are, there is always another equal and opposite reaction that is going to take place to the action of their overconfidence and their very poor budget. People tend to actually have to suffer the consequences of their own actions, and the Liberals are not going to be the ones to buck that trend. Anyways, with that all being said, thank you guys for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next time.